So we all know Christians believe in some pretty wrong stuff. Despite their veneer of God is love and all that jazz, we really don't see much love or truth, which is the greatest form of love from a person. In this video, I'll go into 10 reasons why Christians are fundamentally incorrect in their theology and why Neogenesis is the only true faith. Number 1, God of the gaps and denying naturalistic explanations. The creators gave us a brain and ingenuity to discern things around us. Through their love for humanity, we engineered things like modern medicine and life-saving procedures to fix what's not right. Yet Christians still cling to outdated superstitious nonsense such as blaming illness on the devil, on them not praying enough, or just a bad season. What we need to understand is some things are not demons, nor are they of supernatural origins. It simply can be a case of you eating undercooked food and getting salmonella from it. To blame everything that happens in your life on God or the devil is a classic symptom of God of the gaps thinking. And this could lead to very dangerous superstitious-like thinking. I can bring up countless cases of mentally ill parents murdering their own children out of a perceived demonic influence over the child, when in fact the child probably just has some neurodivergent issue. Is this to say that all modern medicine is good? Absolutely not. There does exist a system of the United States government that keeps pumping medication and drugs to people that don't really need them just to make the money and ruin their lives. But when you fail to see the naturalistic explanation for things, then you're simply just going to remain ignorant and you're going to hurt yourself and others because of your phony superstitions. Number 2, Christian nationalism and bigotry. This may only apply to the United States, but in the United States, mainly due to the culture and people who allegedly call themselves Christians, tend to have a cult-like love for country, failing to realize that their country has never done anything for them, and are in fact committing idolatry every time they salute their flag with a tear in their eye. In the past few decades, Christian nationalism and other right-wing reactionary ideologies influenced by Christianity have sprung up not only in America, but across the globe. These ideologies can be very dangerous and lead to people committing mass shootings and terrorist attacks. If not physical violence, mental and emotional violence can be seen in their behavior. I see this mainly with evangelical Christians, but there's also a fair share of Catholics and Orthodox who are extremely radical, yet in reality, if you saw them in real life, they probably can't even stand for 15 minutes without getting winded. But the ones who are capable of committing violence and harming others for the sake of religion tend to rationalize it by using their false version of the Bible, as it says here in Galatians, by the false apostle Paul. There's so much talk of the flesh and how it's allegedly evil, when in reality trying to live a life pious, according to Christianity and by extension Judaism, is virtually impossible because not everybody has the same level of objective morality. Bigotry within Christianity may be subtle with slight hints about how the world is somehow an enemy, or how the world is devolving into sin. Not to say that the world isn't chaotic and dangerous, but the way in which Christian and, by extension, nationalists to view it as some kind of holy war jihad to fight is very similar to rhetoric espoused by groups like ISIS and the Taliban. It is also a gasp that so many Christians love Donald Trump, when in reality he's nothing but a filibuster shadow government elite who wouldn't give you a ham sandwich if you were dying on the side of the road, not like Jesus in any way. Now, is this all to say that right-wing beliefs are bad? No, not really, but there are some rhetoric that can be dangerous when espoused by the wrong people, and people who don't exactly have the mental capacity or sanity to believe in it properly. To conclude the second reason, the world is not full of enemies to be destroyed, but sinners to love. And until Christians realize that they will continue their reign of terror over humanity, and only Neogenesis egalitarianism is the solution. Number 3, Paulinity. Next time a Christian tells you something about Paul, simply refer to Corinthians 1:13-14. Ask them were they crucified under the name of Paul or baptized in the name of Paul. Now you may be asking, if Christ isn't divided, why are there so many denominations? Well, this is proof alone that Christianity and its current state is fundamentally incorrect. There cannot be division in something if said something is true. We could also see Paul's detrimental effect and ultimate failure of the succession of Christ's ministry, and how modern Christianity, mainly Pentecostal and evangelicals, but also by extension Christianity in the past, has treated and destroyed the world for their own selfish gain and proselytization. Take a look at Mark 18. This is John the Baptist saying that baptism is law. Meanwhile, Paul was stating in Romans 6:14 that the laws don't really matter yet. You'll find Christians nowadays, for some reason, saying that the moral law is still in effect when there can't be either or. Now, if we flip to Romans 3:7, the alleged apostle says he is in fact a liar. Paul in Romans 3:7 tells you he's a liar. Now, you can do what you want with all the books of Paul and all the teachings of Paul, but Paul himself admits to be a liar, a direct violation of the ninth commandment. Go to Matthew 7:21 and 22. And you'll see right there, Jesus is going to tell those people who are worshiping incorrectly, judging people, and laying hands on people saying that's from Jesus. Jesus is going to tell them, I never knew you, get what away from. Get away from you workers of iniquity. This is why Neogenesis views Paul as a deceiver who probably caused the most suffering and destruction on earth, even if he did exist. Paul's focus on legalism, church hierarchy, and his specific interpretations of salvation deviated from what Jesus taught, leading to the creation of the modern mainstream church systems that we see today, unfortunately. Number 4, Yahweh is evil. Despite what Abrahamists will say, their demiurge God is not very loving or even understanding of his alleged creations. Not a lot of people understand Gnosticism, just write it off as heresy or fan fiction of the Bible, when in reality it's the truth of the nature of the Abrahamic God. In fact, we know from archaeology that Yahweh was a part of the ancient Canaanite pantheon and is the son of El and Asherah or Sophia. Yet cognitive dissonance makes Christians unable to accept this fact, trying to refute it with, of all things, the Bible. Isaiah 45:7 in fact says that God created evil. So reverting back to my first reason, it's not Satan that creates evil, but God creates evil, funnily enough, in the Christian canon. Not to mention all of the genocide that is enacted under the name of Yahweh in the Bible, specifically the Old Testament, that to this day, we are feeling the aftershocks of. If you look at the modern state of Israel and Palestine, and really all of this can be rewound back to a desert storm god that crawled out of the pleroma and said he was the only true God. When even in fact in Psalms 82 it mentions a council of gods that exists. Now people have been claiming for centuries that these are somehow angels, when if that was the case, why are they referred to as little g gods rather than angels? In fact, a lot of things in the Bible can be considered polytheism, not only the Trinity, but the 24 elders in Revelations as well. So to claim that there's only one God, monotheistically speaking, does not make any sense logically. Marcionism is the only logical answer on if the gods of the Old Testament and New Testament are the same. While one sounds like a bloodthirsty Islamic caliphate leader, one preaches love and forgiveness. Obviously, some difference. Jesus, in fact, in John 8:44, calls all followers of Yahweh children of Satan. When you've actually studied culture and see how all religions seem to have a similarity to them, you will finally understand how Neogenesis operates in its polytheistic beliefs. Number 5, Zionism. Many Christians falsely believe that the people mentioned in the Bible are the same people as the Israeli or Jewish people in the modern sense, or that Jesus is a Jew, not realizing that Second Temple Judaism exists, as well as the Talmud exists, which has not so nice things to say about Christians. To give a rundown, the modern-day Jewish people are not descendants of really anybody from the Bible. Most people who identify as Jewish are Eastern European people, who for all intents and purposes pretend to be Jewish. And in fact, the real descendants are only located in the Levant, as well as the lost tribes here in America. Zionism is effectively an ethno-nationalist ideology much like the Jewish religion itself. Judaism views itself as superior to all goyim. Because of just how many people in the government identifies as Jewish, you really cannot bring up anything about it or criticize it in any way or risk of being called anti-Semitic, when in reality, Judaism is not a race. It's a religion, and unfortunately, many Americans view the state of Israel and its crimes as justifiable because it's somehow a homeland to the Jews and is needed for some phony prophecy they just made up out of thin air. The land of Canaan, in a lot of localizations, has been called Palestine for centuries, the modern state of Palestine, which was rightfully created as a way for segregated Muslims to have their own nation state, is effectively in an apartheid state, and now is full-on committing genocide against the native population, a bit like their so-called ancestors in the Old Testament. To bring up my fourth point, why exactly should I worship a God that allows such things like that are happening in Gaza? Why exactly isn't all loving God allowing his people to be murdered in war? The true gods would never allow such a thing. And this is just more proof that Neogenesis has the ultimate truth when it comes to why bad things happen to good people.
Every good thing we know, all the things we love about the Bible, they were given to us of the Jewish nation. Israel, their people, the Jews, are better than all of us. They're better than all of us. And you need to accept that.
Number 6, denying prophets. In Neogenesis, we view Christianity as it is practiced today as deeply flawed because it often betrays its own prophets, either by killing them outright, like Joseph Smith and David Koresh, or by rejecting their messages and distorting their teachings, like with Muhammad. This tendency to resist new revelations and cling to corrupted versions of divine truth has kept Christianity spiritually stagnant and locked in dogma. Using both the Quran and the Bible, we can see how Muhammad represents the true succession of Jesus' mission and how modern Christianity deviates from the original divine plan. The Bible itself repeatedly mentions how the Israelites and later Christians reject and kill their own prophets. This pattern extends even into modern times. As it says in Matthew 23:37, Jesus himself criticized the religious authorities of his time for rejecting God's messengers. This pattern didn't stop with Jesus. It continued with later figures like Joseph Smith and David Koresh, whose messages were met with violence instead of discernment. Christianity claims to follow a God of love and truth, yet it has historically responded to challenging truths with violence. Smith sought to restore Christianity to a purer form, but mainstream Christians dismissed him as a heretic. Koresh claimed to reveal the deeper, esoteric meanings of Revelation, yet he was demonized and ultimately had him and his church murdered and burned alive by forces influenced by Christian fear-mongering and government Babylon-type policies. Instead of engaging with their teachings, Christians often shut down dialogue by labeling anyone outside their tradition as false prophets or worse. This resistance shows that modern Christianity prioritizes dogma over spiritual growth and institutional power. The Quran directly addresses how Christians went astray by corrupting Jesus' original teachings, as it says in Quran 4:171. Muhammad represents the continuation of Jesus' mission to restore spiritual truth. While Jesus confronted the religious authorities of his time and tried to guide people back to God, his message was corrupted after his death. Muhammad was sent to correct these distortions and bring a final revelation. It may say in the Quran to trust the Torah and Bible, but this is more saying that these books failed, and the Quran was the ultimate fix to the issues within these books. People might bring up the laws for prophets as stated in Deuteronomy, but you need to realize that with the advent of Jesus, the Old Testament's Levitical commandments and laws are null and void, and essentially they don't matter anymore. So anyone at all can be a prophet. Flip to John 16:12-14. Christians often interpret this as referring to the Holy Spirit, but from a Neogenesis lens. This can also be seen as a prophecy of Muhammad, who brought a comprehensive guide, the Quran, to clarify and expand upon earlier revelations. Now, is this to say that Mormonism and Islam, as it exists in the modern sense, are fundamentally true? Nah, not particularly. Just like with Christianity, pretty much all religions have been corrupted by man to fit certain narratives and zeitgeists. However, Neogenesis is here to lift that spell of Leviathan and unveil the tricks being done on the average person. Number 7. Salvation by works. The whole idea of faith by works, the belief that you have to do good deeds or follow specific rules to earn salvation, falls apart pretty quickly when you actually look at Scripture and, frankly, use some common sense. Let's start with the thief on the cross. The thief on the cross in Luke 23:39 to 43 destroys the whole faith by works argument. The guy is literally hanging there, about to die, with zero chance to do anything remotely resembling good works. He doesn't keep any commandments, doesn't tithe, doesn't get baptized, doesn't even join a church. All he does is recognize who Jesus is and ask for mercy. Jesus replies, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." Boom, done. No hoops to jump through, no laundry list of works required. It's clear. Salvation isn't about your resume of good deeds. It's about connection and recognition of the divine and a relationship with it. This whole one God idea, it's super inconsistent when you think about it. If there's only one God, why are there so many religions, so many different interpretations of the divine? Why would one all-powerful deity allow such confusion? Ancient polytheistic religions, like those of the Greeks, Egyptians, and Mesopotamians, made way more sense. They understood that the divine is diverse, multifaceted, and complex, just like the world. One God for the sun, another for the sea, another for wisdom. It reflects the way nature and life actually work. But monotheism? It tries to cram everything into one being, which makes that God seem petty, overworked, and inconsistent. Why does the one God care about minor stuff like eating pork, wearing mixed fabrics, or saying the right prayers? That sounds like micromanagement, not divinity. Now let's talk about shirk in Islam, the idea that associating partners with Allah is the worst possible sin. Really? Worse than murder? Worse than genocide? Worse than abusing the vulnerable? The logic doesn't hold up. Think about this. If someone genuinely connects to the divine through a different lens, like through polytheism, is that really worse than someone committing horrific acts while claiming to follow Allah? The idea that the crime of believing differently is somehow the biggest offense is just an excuse to control people's thoughts and limit spiritual freedom. Plus, the Quran itself says that God's mercy is infinite. If that's true, why would God lose it over someone misunderstanding the divine? A truly divine being wouldn't be that insecure. Neogenesis sees all religions as reflections of the divine collective, different perspectives on the same spiritual truths. The fact that religions exist all over the world, with unique gods, rituals, and teachings, shows that the divine is way bigger than any one tradition. Why would a truly divine force reveal itself to only one group of people at one point in history? That doesn't make sense. If gods exist, and Neogenesis says they do, they've been reaching out to humanity in countless ways across time, from ancient Egypt to modern-day spiritual movements. Every religion carries a piece of the truth. Number 8, false Christ. From everything we've heard so far, you would be justified in assuming that New Genesis doesn't believe in Jesus, or the divinity of Jesus, when in fact this is a misconception. We believe in Jesus, we love Jesus, we think that he is but many gods, and is the Son of God's plural. Jesus is part of the council of the Elohim, and unfortunately in modern Christianity, not a lot of people understand that. They view Christ as the only way to heaven. Let's lay it out bluntly. The modern Christian version of Christ is a completely twisted, Pauline Frankenstein version of the actual teachings of Jesus. Christians today worship a false Christ, a concoction of Paul's manipulations, church politics, and centuries of control tactics. They claim Jesus is the only way to heaven. But if you actually look at what Jesus taught and how Paul ruined everything, you'll see that this idea is just self-serving dogma. The whole Jesus is the only way to heaven thing is based on a misreading of John 14:6. Now, does that mean everyone has to chant Jesus like a password? Not at all. What Jesus was saying is that his teachings, love, compassion, humility, forgiveness, are the way to the divine. He didn't say, you better sign up for Christianity or burn forever. Modern Christians love to twist this into exclusivity, but Jesus' actual message was about universal principles, not gatekeeping salvation. Now things essentially went off the rails with Paul, as previously mentioned. Paul never even met Jesus, yet somehow he became the loudest voice in shaping Christianity. His letters twisted Jesus' simple, revolutionary message into a bloated theology full of guilt, fear, and submission. Modern Christians act like Jesus was all about starting a members-only club, but that's just not true. Jesus spent most of his time with outcasts, sinners, and non-believers, proving that his message wasn't limited to one group or religion. Matthew 25:31-46. When Jesus talks about the final judgment, it's all about what you did: feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, caring for the sick. Not once does he say, "Did you believe in me?" The focus is on actions, not creeds. If modern Christians were right, and belief in Jesus was the only thing that mattered, why would Jesus care so much about how people treat others? It's because salvation isn't about labels or dogma. It's about how you live, and Neogenesis understands this fully. We expect Jesus' return and gladly accept him. If only Christians knew the truth and accepted the true form of Christ, we wouldn't have to worry. Number 9, homophobia. Now, this may seem relatively trivial compared to some of the things we've talked about, but Neogenesis believes that all people are created equal by the gods, and no person or really God has authority to dictate how a person can love one another, and this is important, and the somehow equation by most radical Christians that LGBTQ people are somehow a symptom of a devolving society, or equate them to people like pedophiles is just bigotry. From a Neogenesis perspective, the idea that marriage is only between a man and a woman is a bit outdated and doesn't capture the deeper spiritual purpose of relationships. The claim that marriage has to follow this one rigid model misses the bigger picture about what it actually means to connect with someone. Truth and spirituality aren't one size fits all. There's no universal divine law that says marriage must look the same in every time and place. If you look historically, different cultures have recognized different forms of relationships, from polygamous marriages to same-sex unions and even partnerships that didn't involve romance at all. Just because the Bible has some traditional ideas doesn't mean those ideas are the only truth. Spiritual connections come in all forms, and Neogenesis sees this as part of the divine collective. The idea that all types of love and commitment have their place. What actually matters in a marriage isn't the gender of the people involved, but the depth of the connection. Marriage is about two people choosing each other, committing to growth together, and creating a shared path in life. If the divine is reflected in love and unity, then any relationship built on those values is inherently sacred, regardless of whether it's between a man and a woman, two women, two men, or any other pairing. The Christian idea that it has to be one man and one woman feels more like a cultural rule than a divine law. Christians often talk about biblical marriage, as if the Bible shows one clear example of marriage. But if you actually look at it, the Bible has all sorts of marriages. Solomon had hundreds of wives and concubines. Abraham had a wife and a concubine. Jacob had 2 wives and some handmaids. If marriage were strictly one man, one woman, these examples wouldn't be in there. And then there's levirate marriage, where a man had to marry his brother's widow if his brother died without kids. That's about family duty, not romantic love or one man, one woman. So, even in the Bible, marriage was more about practical, cultural needs than about some divine rule of who can marry whom. At its core, Neogenesis values freedom and individual responsibility. We believe every person should have the freedom to choose a partner based on what aligns with their true self and spiritual path, not based on what others tell them is correct. The connection between two people, whether they're of the same gender or different genders, is what matters. If it's genuine, supportive, and helps them grow, that's a divine connection. Forcing everyone to conform to a narrow idea of marriage just doesn't align with the values of freedom and personal growth. Neogenesis isn't about boxing people in. It's about letting people find their path and honoring their true connections. Number 10, and the final point. Let's take apart the whole hellfire and eternal punishment nonsense because, honestly, the concept of hell doesn't hold up when you actually look at Scripture critically. Most people believe in hell because they've been told it's in the Bible, but it's not as clear-cut as pastors make it sound. Hell is more about control than genuine spirituality. Let's break it. If hell were such a central part of God's plan, why doesn't the Old Testament talk about it? God told Adam that if he ate of the tree of knowledge, she would certainly die, not go to some fiery eternal punishment afterlife. The ancient Hebrews didn't even have a concept of hell like Christians do. Instead, they believed in Sheol, which is more like a shadowy underworld where all dead people go. Good, bad, everyone. No eternal fire, no torture, just nothingness. Ecclesiastes 9:10. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. For in the realm of the dead, where you are going, there is neither working, nor planning, nor knowledge, nor wisdom. Sheol is described as a neutral place where the dead exist without consciousness or judgment. No fire, no demons poking people with pitchforks. So, if hell were real, why doesn't it show up here? When Jesus talks about hell, the word he actually uses is Gehenna, a real place outside Jerusalem. Gehenna was a garbage dump where trash and dead bodies were burned, not a supernatural torture chamber. Gehenna is a metaphor for total obliteration, not a place where people roast forever. Context matters, but most preachers conveniently skip over that part. Christians love to point to Luke 16:19-31. The parable of Lazarus and the rich man is proof of hell. But here's the thing, it's a parable, not a literal description of the afterlife. Jesus used this story to make a point about greed and compassion, not to map out hell's geography. Notice how Abraham is in the story? Are we really supposed to believe Abraham is hanging out in the afterlife as a gatekeeper? Number. This parable is symbolic, and taking it literally misses the whole point. The lake of fire in Revelation isn't a literal eternal punishment either. Revelation is full of symbolism and apocalyptic imagery, not straightforward facts. Revelation 20:14 is essentially just saying, if death and Hades are thrown into the lake, it symbolizes the end of death and evil, not eternal torment. The second death isn't about roasting forever. It's about complete destruction, ceasing to exist. How does eternal torture fit with the idea of a loving, merciful God? It doesn't. The Bible emphasizes over and over again that God is just and compassionate. 1 John 4:8 is a bit strange, considering eternal torment isn't love. It's sadism. If God's defining quality is love, the idea of hell as a place of eternal punishment is a contradiction. Flip to Psalm 103:8-10. If God doesn't stay angry forever, why would he punish people forever? It doesn't add up. Punishing someone forever for finite sins makes no sense. If God is just, the punishment would fit the crime. Eternal hell is overkill, plain and simple. Let's be real, hell as a concept didn't fully develop until the early church started using it to control people. It's a great way to scare people into obedience. Believe what we say, or you'll burn forever. It's more about maintaining power than divine truth. By the time we get to Dante's Inferno and medieval Christianity, Hell has been blown way out of proportion, with images of demons torturing people for eternity. None of that is biblical. It's cultural baggage. Ironically enough, it seems like Jehovah's Witnesses have the genuine understanding of the afterlife when it comes to Abrahamism. The Bible alludes mainly to a soul sleep, that death is simply just non existence until Jesus Christ comes back. Verily, Neogenesis shares the same exact belief system because it says it in the scripture in a non corrupted manner. Even if the Bible is corrupted, which it is, we can still use it as a good mediator and study tool. And for any Christians out there that want to refute what I'm saying or get up in arms about me because of this video, I want you to hear what I have to say and really consider it. No matter how you feel about me or Neogenesis's beliefs, someone loves you. Someone out there is afraid to lose you. Christianity might make you feel like you're a part of something bigger, but in fact actually diminishes you. You're not just a Christian, you're a whole person. There's so much more to you that could be summed up than by what religion you are. You're more than that. You have hopes, you have dreams, you have a favorite song, you laugh when you hear a joke, you cry when something bad happens to you, and so does everyone else. And if you want the truth, you can join the real world like the rest of us. Simplest thing there is.